In my first video, I talked about how you struggle to brace in your plant foot and what's going on and how to fix it. In this video, I'm going to look at the run-up and what's happening in the run-up that might be causing you to struggle to brace. Like the plant foot, there is something that you naturally do that is keeping you from being able to brace well. So we're going to look at what's going on and examples of how to fix it. So here's a good example of bracing. Bracing is where you keep your weight behind your front foot as you plant your foot. So you plant your foot with the weight behind it. And this allows for an abrupt stop of your weight and your momentum going forward. Then, as you can see, Calvin here, coming out of that plant, he rotates on his heel and with the weight still there behind him, allowing him to transfer the force from his run-up into the throw. If you don't have a brace, then your weight is going to be up on top of your plant foot, and you will not be able to transfer your force into the throw. And you're going to, kind of be stuck in distance, not able to put more into the throw. Again, notice how he is rotating on his heel. Look at my previous video to see ideas on how to learn to rotate on the heel, because if you're rotating on the ball of your foot, you cannot brace well. So why do people struggle in bracing? Let's jump into it. I believe that I have found the answer to the really big question of why people struggle to brace. But this is initially a hypothesis that needs to be tested. So please test out these ideas and see how it goes. See if it makes a difference for you. It has definitely made a difference for me. So let's take a look. Here is what you might see in an average disc golfer who has been learning and trying to apply what they've learned. So a lot of people are at this point. They get to this point in their throw and they don't know how to go forward. They want more distance, they want more accuracy, but they don't know what's going on that's keeping them from achieving those things. And so there's something very important, again, something natural that you do in your run-up that is keeping you from being able to brace. So first, remember, bracing is keeping your weight behind your plant foot. So the logic here is that something in the run-up is keeping you from being able to keep your weight behind your plant foot. And what is that? To see what that is, we want to kind of map the trajectory of the weight through the run-up and see. And just where is the problem likely going to be? So the problem with the weight, just what is closest to the plant foot, that's the X step. So if there's going to be a problem in the weight transfer and the trajectory of the weight, then it's probably going to be on the X step. So I want to map his weight and see what's happening. Step, step. Every time we take a step, we are pushing our weight up and forward with each step. Now, if we stop and completely stop, then our weight will come all the way down. But if we don't, then we're just pushing it forward. So it starts and the weight is pushed. And then as that weight comes down, it's pushed again. And then again, it's going to be pushed. All right, so the weight is being kept up and pushed forward. with each step. And there on the X step, again, the X step is pushing that weight up and forward. So here we can see the trajectory of the weight and how it's being kept up and pushed forward. So here he's just taking normal steps, okay? And that's just natural for people to do. Just take normal steps with each step. And that X step is no different. That's just a normal step. It feels comfortable. It feels natural. But each step is pushing that weight up. And you see how when he takes that X step, it's also pushing the weight up and forward. And what happens on the plant foot then? You can see where that weight is going to be at when he reaches the plant foot. And so there we can see that his weight is pushed up and forward. It's on top of the plant foot. Now let's look at a comparison of someone who plants really well and who braces really well. So here again is Calvin, and again Calvin braces really well. So let's take a look at Calvin. All right, let's take a look at Calvin's throw. He's going to be starting off doing the same thing with his weight being pushed up and forward with each step. And then he gets to this step. This step is right before the X step. So he has this step, the X step, and then the plant. And we need new terminology, I think, to describe what's going on here with this step. I'm going to call this the launch step. You'll see what I'm talking about. He launches off, and his weight now is going up. His weight is going up like this. All right, so his weight is going up, and the X step did not alter his weight in any way. So his weight went up, and then it came down to his plant. All right, so we can see the difference pretty easily, right? So the blue lines are the normal average player, where the weight is being pushed up on each step, including the X step. But then with Calvin here, his weight is going up until the launch step. And then with his X step, there is no change in the trajectory of the weight from the X step. The trajectory of the weight goes up and then all straight down onto the plant and follows that arc. And this is the big secret. This is the big answer to why people struggle to brace. The natural movement for them in the X step is to just use it like any normal step and to push their weight up and forward. And when you do that, that weight goes up onto the brace foot. And you cannot then brace because your weight is up on top already. Here, if you have a launch step that launches your weight in this uninterrupted trajectory to your plant foot, then you can brace. So the big thing is that the X step cannot change the trajectory of your weight from your launch step to your plant foot. All right, let's watch Calvin again here. And you'll be able to see how he launches his weight off his launch step and onto his plant foot. Okay, launch. X step doesn't change the weight. The weight is not being impacted until then he hits. All right, you can see this pattern with pretty much every pro now who's able to brace well. Once you start looking for their weight and what they're doing with their weight and whether or not it's interrupted by their X step, you'll be able to see the magic happening. So let's take a look at some others. So here is Albert Tam, his 710-foot drive. Let's take a look at him. Launch step, weight isn't affected by the X step. And then onto the plant foot. Again, launch step, the weight, it's going up and then down and is not affected. Basically meaning that he is not pushing his weight up and forward with his X step. All right, let's take some, at this point, a lot of people might say, yeah, but these are elite athletes and normal people can't do what these elite athletes can do. I just want to stop you right there because to be honest, it's kind of lazy thinking. There are tons of ways that people have come up with to do what we're looking at right here. People are very creative and have come up with tons of different ways to do it, and we'll look at some of those. And so I feel very confident that anybody who is trying to learn disc golf and really wants to do well will be able to find a way to brace better. We just need to be a little bit creative. Now, these guys, Calvin Heimberg, Albert Tam, David Wiggins Jr., they are definitely elite athletes, and what they're doing here, how they are coming all the way over without hardly using their X step at all for their weight, and they're just coming right over it, sometimes even maybe not even touching that X step to the ground. That is very difficult, that method of doing it. That takes a lot of practice, and I don't think every person will be able to do it exactly like that, but there are ways to do it besides that. So let's look at some of those. All right, Sebu. Here is a video how Sebu Bayu throws 650 feet. So in this video, they're showing how he throws so far, and they talk about the crow hop that he does, and that the crow hop is what allows him to throw that far. That's not exactly precise. He's able to throw so far because he does what we're talking about. He uses a launch step to launch his weight in a trajectory that is uninterrupted by the X step. And to do that, he uses the crow hop in order to do that. So let's take a look at his throw real quick. The energy crow hop. But you'll notice that the crow hop is just what we're talking about. Here he launches his weight off, and that X step, doing the crow hop, allows him to not interrupt that trajectory of his weight. All right, so that's one way to do it, and a lot of people use the crow hop to do this. We'll look at some others as well, like Kristen Tatar. I think her form is very easy to see how she does it, and she does it very well. So her bracing is really good because of this. Let's take a look. Launches herself. So you see how she's launching her weight up off of her launch step. And then that crow hop allows her X step to go down without impacting the trajectory of the weight. So the weight is going up and then down onto the plant foot thanks to the crow hop. And that allows her weight to be behind the plant foot. So it went up and down. If she took a normal X step, like most people, normal average players do, that weight would still be going up there. And there she is braced very well. Again, I'll point out she's rotating on her heel like you need to do in order to come out of this, because you have a lot of weight going down onto your plant foot, and you have to be able to rotate out correctly, or you're probably going to injure yourself. Okay, so let's take a look at some others and see how they do it. Here's Paige Pierce. Launch. So there's her launch step, and she also has a kind of crow hop that she does. Okay, pretty similar actually. Again, this X step is not impacting that trajectory of her weight. So because of that, it allows that weight to stay behind there. Okay, in this example of Ezra, he shows another method for doing this, which I think is pretty important to look at. Let's take a look at what Ezra does. Launch step. Okay, did you notice that? So he has the launch step, but doesn't actually launch his weight there. All right, so this is another way to do this. Did you see what he does with his X step? It is extremely close to the launch step. So again, this is one way to do it. That X step is extremely close. And basically what's happening here, the weight is the weight is simply being handed off to the X step. And then he's just going to lean forward and let the weight fall forward. Ezra has taken a step, and then with his launch step, he's pushing that weight up, but then that weight is just switched over to that X step. And that's possible because the X step was so close to the launch step. And then that's going to allow him just to fall forward, and it's just going to fall forward and down. All right, so do you see that? So this is a different way of doing it. This is not going to generate the kind of power that we see from the other methods, but it is a legitimate way to do this. So by having the X step so close to the launch step, it allows that weight to just be handed off. And then the weight, then it just falls over, basically. So the weight is handed off and then just falls over. Now, in order to do this, you do have to stretch that out quite a ways. So that might be a little bit of a challenge for some people. But again, the important point of it was having that tiny X step to just transfer the weight over to make that happen. Let's look at that again. So transfers the weight to the X step and then just allows the weight to fall over. So that's one way to do it. Again, it's not going to be able to generate as much power, but it is a very legitimate way to do this. And I think that is why Simon in his video, here in his form critique video, one of the things that he says to do was, for this guy, was to shorten the X step, was a suggestion that he had for him, to shorten it. And it's interesting how pros know some of these things like intuitively, but then maybe aren't able to spell it out as far as why. But that's pretty normal. So Simon is interesting, and it's a little bit different. If we're just looking here from this angle down the bottom left, it looks like his X step is impacting the trajectory of his weight. Let's take a look. So here is his launch step, and then watch as his weight comes up and down, but what his X step does there. So there, it looked like the X step did impact the weight transfer, but it seems fine. And we all know he is incredibly good and throws incredibly far. But when we look at it from behind, from over here, I think we see what's going on with Simon, and why his looks quite a bit different. So let's look at this on the right side. So there we have his launch step. And then we have that short X step. But then notice how much horizontal movement is going on. Maybe more than others. There's a lot of horizontal movement. When I'm saying horizontal, vertical is towards the target, and horizontal is left and right as we're seeing it. So that X step is kind of shifting the trajectory of the weight, but just horizontally. It's moving it towards the right. So the weight is still going in an arc from the launch step down to the plant foot. But then that X step is just shifting that weight to the right. And as we all know, he can crush it. He can throw as far as anyone. So that obviously works for him. One of the big things to watch out then for people would be to avoid kind of pushing that weight up onto their plant foot, which I'm sure will be very hard if you go with this type of method, because it's so natural to just push that weight up. Good way to kind of start going down that road would be to just really shorten that X step. And I'll show you another way. A guy from my local group does it. He throws very well. I've seen him park 500-foot holes. He has a way of doing this that is fairly unique. So let's take a quick look at that. Okay, this is in slow motion. So what we see here is launch step and then an extremely small X step. So his weight is basically just going to be falling over onto the front foot. Just look at that frame by frame. So the weight's going to be falling over onto the plant foot. And then there, right before the plant foot hits, he releases the X step foot so that it gets maybe a few inches. Yeah, maybe about 4 inches where his weight just drops really hard onto the plant foot. As this comes completely off the ground, the weight just drops really hard. So again, it's about getting your weight to drop onto the plant foot and avoiding pushing that weight up over the plant foot with your X step. And people are really, really creative about finding ways to do this. I'm sure you'll see other ways now that people achieve it. Look at anybody who is throwing really far, like 400, 500 feet, and see what they're doing with their weight and how they're avoiding using their X step to push that, give that weight an extra boost. Okay, so we've looked at a bunch of different ways that people will use their launch step to send their weight on a trajectory that goes up and then down onto their plant foot without it being interrupted by their X step. There are several methods to try using crow hop, using just a greater deal of force so that your X step barely touches the ground. And there's the way that Simon does it. And so for myself, I'm obviously going to be trying out a bunch of different methods probably, because I like to experiment. But I personally really like the way that Gossage does his crow hop. Let me just show that real quick. All right, so here's a good example of Gossage doing the crow hop. Okay, there is launch step, and he's going to launch his weight with the doing the crow hop with the X step coming down without interrupting the weight transfer. All right, so then it's coming down onto the plant foot. So this, yeah, I personally like this. I like how compact it is. And another thing that I really like is how he uses it not just off the tee, but for full power, but he'll use it for shorter shots as well. So here's a shorter shot where he also is using it. So I personally like this, using the same method for shorter shots and longer shots, because I think that makes sense for getting consistency on shots. And also, I think that's what really enabled him to have a lot of power in driving his shots low, but for a long distance in this particular tournament. Whereas Calvin kind of struggled in this tournament, perhaps because of the low ceiling. He was great off the tee, able to throw it far, but then when it came to these shorter shots, it kind of struggled in throwing long and with a low ceiling. So I personally want to try this method out a lot to see how that works for me. But I don't know, we'll see. I'll be experimenting a lot. And so big question I think everybody has is, does this actually work? So I figured this out last week, and I started doing some trials. I started doing some practice, and I started trying out the crow hop. I have only been playing disc golf for about a little over a year, and I am 42 years old. Okay, and this throw went 400 feet. Okay, there are all kinds of problems with that. I can point out tons of stuff. I was throwing that on some Anheuser, but anyways, so yeah, just trying it out, I've noticed a pretty big boost in distance and power immediately, just in the first couple of tries. And so try out different ways of doing it, experiment with some of the methods that we look at all the pro golfers and see how they transfer their weight without interrupting it with their X step, and then try things out and experiment and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear feedback on how this helps. And let me know if there are any other things that you would like me to talk about. I do have a lot to say about forehand, so I might also do a video about that in the future. So thanks a lot and good luck out there. Okay, one thing to watch out for with this, keep in mind on every type of throw that you do. But if you are just doing one step throw and you step forward, you are pushing your weight up onto your plant foot. So just take a quick look at this. So if you do a one step throw, you are pushing your weight up onto your front foot. If you do that, you're already unable to brace. Okay, you can't brace if you're doing that. An alternative that is to take a sideways step. If you take a sideways step, you're not going to push your weight up onto it because you're going to be throwing or across your body towards the target. So be really careful about that one step throw because it's just really easy to push your weight up onto your plant foot. I have found that taking that sideways step allows you to avoid that. It already is putting your X step, your back foot, into a neutral position that's not going to push your weight up. Then when you throw, your weight is naturally going to stay behind your plant foot. Let me show you an example of that really fast, actually. Okay, so let me give you an example really quick of a one-step throw where you step sideways instead of forward. Again, stepping sideways kind of gives you a neutral back foot that's not going to push your weight up onto your plant foot because your body has no benefit in doing that. You're not going forward. Instead, you're going to be throwing across the body. Okay, so that's already going like 360, 375 there. And again, that is because of the weight in the plant. I'm not pushing the weight up onto it. You can see how come on. Okay, there you can see how the weight is behind it, behind the foot, and stays behind it through the throw. Okay. Again, just be careful with the one-step throws that you're not pushing that weight up onto the front foot, which is really, really easy to do with one-step throw. Okay.